So this is Van Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Craig Cooke tonight, author and consultant for business and energetic practices. Welcome to the Van Electric Ghost podcast. How you doing tonight?
Really great. Thank you, Phantom, for having me. I'm really happy and excited to be here.
Want to let people know if you can look up on the top, there's a little icon that says listen on Newsly. You see scrolling below a coupon code of Ghost. If you check that out, if you use Ghost at newsly.me, you can check that out for 30 days free. That's an audio podcast platform. We're live on that. We will be on that platform later tonight with this episode. And if you use that coupon code, you can check it out for free. Again, we're a featured podcast on the Newsly Network. And I want to let people know that actually we're at episode 1033 today. And so that's tracking out on Apple Podcasts since 2016. And so that's where we are tonight. And we also have, for those of you who are listening or watching, we've got your website, which is cssquaredpro.io/books. And that will be fully clickable when we're published on everywhere on the web. It's not clickable right now, but when we're published on all the platforms that we're on most podcast platforms, you'll be able to click through on that and get to, and that's where you have your book, right, that you've written about business.
Yes,
so
correct.
that's, it was, yeah. So do you have other, that's how people can reach you is through that website, right?
That's correct. That's one way to reach me, and it works perfectly fine.
So maybe you
Congrats
can kind of
on.
give it, go ahead.
Oh, I was just say congratulations on episode 1033. That's quite an accomplishment to have over 1,000 episodes. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's something we kind of had this idea of this showing up. And what we did is, like, a lot of podcasters, the story about podcasters is they tend to go about 12 episodes, and if they don't reach the metrics they want, they stop. But the way I looked at it was I've had over 1,000 episodes, talked to over, 1,000 people. And in that, when I look at that, is like, that's an opportunity. So as a person, I'm gaining all this knowledge for an hour that I spend with an individual that's got their own point of view, their own ideas, their own services or products or whatever. And so those things to me is like, it's like it's an education. And so that in itself, whether I am clicking on somebody's metric or not, I find that useful.
Absolutely, 100% agree. That's fantastic.
But again, maybe you can kind of give a background. I know I kind of briefly talked about that you're an author, you're a consultant, you've been an entrepreneur, you've been into digital transformation, and maybe you want to speak to like your story, start wherever you want to.
Sure, absolutely. So my business career began as an entrepreneur in 1996. Way back in the 20th century, I created a digital first company. Before that was ever a term, doing digital transformation before that was ever a term. Myself and a couple of friends of mine from college, we started a company called rhythmnet.com. And it was an online company geared towards marketing independent music. It was like this anti-establishment, go against the industrial record machine of
Like
force
Sub
feeding
Pop
it.
or something, like Sub Pop.
Yeah, there's so many different services out there. Like there's K-Space or something like that, and Iuma. There's a few back in the day, I remember. And back then, so we built this site, released it in, I think it was May 23rd, 1996. And we officially started on January 2nd in business, 1996. And we allowed people to come to the website, discover independent musicians, and listen to song samples and purchase their CDs through a secure server, which we set up and ran ourselves. Way back in 1996, there was no MP3s. There was no broadband, so the connection was like 14.4 for all those people that are dated like me will know what I'm talking about. And there was only 30 million people worldwide online at the time, worldwide. So pretty much yeah, the population of California was pretty much all there was, and worldwide online. And then everyone is afraid to buy stuff online through their credit
Yeah.
card because yeah,
Yeah.
because it's all
No
like,
PayPal.
oh
No
yeah, yeah,
PayPal. Yeah. Yeah.
none of that stuff. Yeah, no
Yeah.
PayPal, Venmo, any of that. And there's always, oh, the internet's not safe, and not to mention it's like, oh, that's just for computer geeks, and that's just a fad. That's not going to last. You know,
And you get
all that
iTunes
stuff.
later, then iTunes would come along
Yeah.
and have that kind of idea. And yeah, I mean, even
Yes.
like I'm a big fan of Prince, and he had this online thing back in the 90s where he
Yeah.
went,
Prince did. David Bowie
yeah,
did. Yeah.
yeah. And I was a total purple head, so I was right on that. And I didn't care. I put my credit card on that. And I thought it was really cool because it was like I was getting all these songs that none of the other Prince fans were getting because he
Yeah.
was sending us demos and unreleased material that people who happened to join that club. We were hearing it, and it's kind of like
Ah.
I've always been into independent music. That's why I started the podcast. Since
Oh,
in
cool.
2016, I was interviewing independent emerging artists from around the world, finding them on Instagram. And my method of madness was I would post my own material, and then any artist that liked it, I had a pitch, and I would direct message them a pitch and say, "Hey, you want a behind the music type of interview? I'll do it for free." And back
Mm.
then, I was on an app called Spearmint, and it was only audio, and it was on whatever the iPhone was, and that's how we started.
Wow, that's cool. That's cool. Neat. So yeah, we have common ground there with independent music, and yeah, that was a great thing, and it was really fun, but it was really hard for us to make money in that model
Mm,
at that time. So we eventually evolved and started doing a lot of business for companies, with business with companies, and evolved into a digital agency, and just evolved over time. And started to work with middle market to large enterprise companies, and then built it. I was on the Inc. 5000 list 5 years in a row for fastest growing private companies in the United States, and I think only like 7% of the companies that get on the list achieve that mark of 5 years in a row.
wow.
And yeah, it's pretty cool. It's really neat. Also, even earned top places to work, best places to work from a couple different organizations 4 years in a row. We actually stopped applying. That's where we probably would have got more, but we're so busy. It's, forget it. Too busy right now.
Too busy to
Um,
do that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And then eventually sold the company in 2019 to world class digital creative agency based out of New York City. So I stayed on for 3 additional years as CEO, running the company. Then I left last year and took the rest of the year off to rest and recuperate because 26 years I equate each year to a mile. So I ran a marathon and I needed to rest from that
Mm,
marathon. And at the beginning of this year, I just started finding a new purpose moving forward last year. In that this year I started, so and I'm kind of at it, and we can talk about that stuff. But yeah, that's the quick summary of where I've been and where I'm at now.
In your first book, Business Kung Fu, is that kind of telling the story of how what you just talked about?
It is, but more so because it's not just my story. It's my first book, and it was just released last month. So I'm very excited about it because there's something I've always wanted to write a book since I was a teenager, like 17, 18. The idea first came to mind. And my first passion in life actually was books. When as soon
Mhm.
as I could start to read, I always had a book in front of my face, just always reading, always reading. So I started the book in 2011. Took me 12 years to get it done.
Yeah, it's a hard thing.
It's a hard thing, but I stuck with it. Finally got it done, and this year, and just released it. And so the concept, business kung fu, what does that mean? So I studied Chinese kung fu from the age of starting at 17 years old to
Mm,
25, really hardcore, totally in it. And then I started my company at 25, and then I was just all in there. But I took many of the principles I learned from Chinese Kung Fu into how I structured the business, how I thought about the business, my mindset,
mhm.
discipline, perseverance. There's all these great teachings
Eastern
that I.
philosophy, right? Like the Eastern philosophies versus like Western. Is
Mhm.
that what you're applying?
Yeah, it's applying. So there's a number of things that we can talk about. But for example, um, chapter 1 is about laying the foundation. Yeah. And I talk about it's really a mindset book geared towards entrepreneurs. And it could be before they even start, maybe at the beginning of their journey, or anywhere through, and business professionals too, I think can benefit from it. Um, but laying the foundation is really talking about when you go to start your business, your venture, you have to have the proper mindset, and there are certain things that you need to have build a foundation for what you're going to set out to do. Just like in Chinese Kung Fu, you start building a foundation. How do you do that? You do that with learning stances. You do that with learning basic punches and kicks and stepping, movement. And you got to practice these foundational elements before you even begin to start to spar with someone. I did that for a good 6 months of just sitting in stances, punch,
Mhm.
punch, 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 punch.
Yeah.
Uh, and you have to build that foundation. Also, what I talk about is what I call the 5 elements of entrepreneurship, and what that's borrowed from 5 element theory in Chinese culture that applies to martial arts, it applies to medicine, like ancient Chinese medicine, traditional Chinese medicine, and also spiritual systems, Taoism, for example.
Hmm.
Right. So, um, in Chinese culture, the 5 elements are fire, earth, water, metal, and wood. Now, with the 5 elements of entrepreneurship, there's cycles too, and interrelationships between the elements. But my 5 elements of entrepreneurship, it starts with passion. Then passion leads to discipline. Discipline leads to expertise, meaning like some sort of expert skills. Expertise leads to confidence, and then confidence leads to faith. And that's the generative cycle of how
Hmm.
it builds, and you build capacity with each of those elements. Now it could go in the reverse though too, the destructive cycle. If you start to lose attributes, then you spiral downwards.
Hmm.
And then there's an aspect of the interrelationships between the elements, because at the end of the day, you really want to be in balance. Five
Hmm.
element theory is all about balance when it
Balance.
comes to, especially health. I'm also a qigong practitioner, which perhaps we'll get into that topic, but that's where the 5 element theory really comes into play, because we have our constitution, our 5 element constitution that we all have, has a certain ratio and mixture to it, but we want these elements to be in balance. Whenever there's an excess or a deficiency in a specific element, then there's an issue at hand, and you want to be in balance. So in the 5 elements of entrepreneurship, you want to build that capacity, but you also want to be in balance.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of parallels with the, like you said, like the five initial practices where you're talking about like earth and fire and metal, and then you found a way to find the other principles and connect them. And I think sometimes in Western philosophy, people think, well, that's foo-foo or that's kind of out there. But what I've always seen is there's a lot of people have these limiting beliefs that cause deficiencies,
That's
right? Because
right.
they don't, they don't actually, they don't, a lot of times people feel they have to be perfect. And a lot
Mhm.
of what you do is practice. Like if you're a musician, you've probably done 10,000 hours of practicing your bass guitar, your piano, and you've got muscle memory and you've got
Right.
that capability. Like an athlete who practices a play or a 3-point shot or some skill.
Yes.
And
Yes.
those skills, once you have them, you have to, kind of rely on the fact that you have to believe they're there. You have to have the confidence. Because if you don't need somebody to tell you, a lot of times if you're a musician, you get into a practice like, oh, what key is it in? If you hear, what key is in. So
That's
you're
right.
kind of like not trusting yourself. Like a lot of times I'm into jazz fusion, and a lot of times we won't even
Ooh.
say it because we just know it.
Oh
And we
yeah.
don't have to go and tell somebody, oh, what's the chord chart? No, I can hear it. So if I can hear
Right.
it, I don't need to ask. I just accept it and go with
Yeah.
this kind of flow state. With the flow
Yeah.
state, there's like
Yes.
no wrong note. You take it,
Yes.
if you hit a note that wasn't expected, you don't stop the song. The song evolves. And
Yes.
I'm in software design, and sometimes the happy accident is kind of just like that in fusion jazz. It's an
Mm,
opportunity. But if you have somebody so rigid and say, well, I didn't have that in my plan, and doesn't actually look at like what we came up by accident might be better than what was in the plan. Do you
right.
have the courage to actually accept that or say, well, it wasn't in the plan, so I'm going to ignore it?
That's fantastic. Those are all great examples. And one thing I'd like to talk about with what you just mentioned a minute or two ago, it fits right into that 5 element model because you talked about the skill of, say, a jazz musician like yourself being able to play, and then you have that confidence knowing that you can adapt and evolve into the song. Because why? Because you have that expertise. That expertise leads to confidence. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and that's that generative cycle. Passion leads to discipline. Discipline leads to expertise. Expertise leads to confidence. Right. So that expertise that you're talking about brings about that confidence where you're able even to perform at this high level of skill. And that became because you were disciplined in mastering your craft, like you mentioned, like 10,000 hours ripping through scales, right? Chord progressions and all those things. Yeah, that takes discipline, and it's through that discipline where you create that you gain that expertise, which leads to confidence. That's a great example.
And then when I've run into like as a producer, I've seen this in cross discipline. Like I'll go see a friend that's a painter and go to their loft and they got hundreds of paintings sitting around. And I'll ask them like,
Mhm.
have you put this into a show or a gallery? Oh, and it's not ready. I'm like,
Mm.
it looks ready to me. So even though they've had the hours, somehow they're comparing themselves on a Picasso or Rene or
Mm.
like Renoir or what they. Oh, so like if like every musician, like if I don't play like John Lennon or Paul
Mm.
McCartney or Miles Davis, does that mean I can't play? I mean, look at Lou Reed. Lou Reed
Mm.
was willing to do what he did with the Velvets,
Yeah.
and it wasn't necessarily at the same level as the Beatles, but
Hmm.
it's in its own genre of this kind of garage rock, kind of indie alternative. Before that
Yeah.
was even known in '66, he inspired Bowie,
Yeah, exactly.
and
100%.
Bowie was like in awe of him, and they actually worked
Yes.
together when they did like Walk on the Wild Side,
Yeah.
and Lou was so kind of like not understanding why Bowie was so in awe of him. He was
Yeah,
like,
and
he did
Bowie
this
would
like, why does this guy like me so much?
yeah, and Bowie would acknowledge him on stage in his concerts. You would hear him reference him from time to time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
Because Lou was like self-deprecating. He's like, "Well, I don't know if I'm this big thing. I'm just like I'm just out here, and I'm just doing
Yeah.
it." But like, he just did it because he loved to do it, and,
Mm.
and and that's why I run into people. It's like, well, they stop doing what they love because they're looking at some metric, and
Ah.
like I do music because I love music, and I've
Mhm.
been playing since I was 17. And I do other things like my software design and podcasting, other things. But if you have a passion, don't let somebody take you away from your passion because they put it on some scale and rate it such a way as well. That's foo foo, and that's not adult, and that's like then you don't do. Then later in life, you'd say, "Yeah, I wanted to be a writer, but I didn't have the confidence to be a writer. I wanted to be a
Yeah.
painter, but I didn't have the confidence because people told me like I shouldn't be even trying to be in that zone."
Right. Yeah. No, that's very true. The naysayers, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that, and that's where the mindset is so important. Where you just need to, if you have that passion, like you're talking about for something, you just got to go for it and do it. And that passion is what fuels discipline. Because if you're passionate about something, when you're spending hours upon hours upon hours, it doesn't feel like work because you're in a flow
No,
state.
yeah, you're in the flow state, and the thing about the passion is like if you're in that flow state and you just do it because you love it, like opportunities happen because I believe in the law of attraction.
Yes.
So if you are like not down on yourself and you throw something into at the wall, which is like the net. So instead of holding your demo or holding your painting or holding your poem or holding your manuscript away from the world, if you put it out into the world, you'd be surprised what happens. You get opportunities that you didn't expect because you run into people with that law of attraction. They get attracted to it. And it might not be your neighborhood, might not be your state, might not be your country. It might be some other country or some other area you didn't even consider. But because you put it out into the world, you get this opportunity.
100%. Because why should you hold all those beautiful creative expressions of your spirit to yourself? Share it, and there will be others that resonate with your frequency, your vibrational frequency, and will love it. So yeah, why hold on to something when you should be sharing it, and more so than ever with the way our world is connected? Because like you said, well, if it's not your neighbor, if it's not your community, maybe not your state, even your country, hey, culture, whatever, hey, somewhere halfway across the world, they might just embrace it. It's amazing the opportunity that exists today with how interconnected we are through technology.
And a lot of people, you get people telling you got to have 1 million views or 10,000 views or 1,000 likes. And I've had situations where, I had a post that had 30 views, but a Grammy award winning producer was one of the views. And then they came on the podcast, and I didn't have to pay anybody. They just came on because they liked what I was doing.
Yeah, that's a great example. And that's that law of attraction at work, right? You're putting it out there and you have that sincere intent of what is driving your passion, and you're vibrating, your energetic frequency is vibrating at such a high level that you're attracting what is of another high vibrational frequency to come your way. We could get into this quite a bit because as a qigong practitioner, I've been doing that for 9 years. It's all about energy, frequency, and vibration, and yeah, that's a whole other topic that we can definitely get into, which I'm very astute at, actually.
Well, I think a lot of creative people, the thing that we have is that we are in tune with the muse. And so
Yes.
the idea of the muse, the Victorian poets, I'm into like Wordsworth and Lord Byron and Blake. They had this idea like you tap into this universal thing. Musicians, sometimes we kind of talk about these universal keys that we are in tune with, and we can channel it. And some of it
Yes.
is like there's a subconscious stuff going on internally.
Hmm.
Everything we ever played, everything we ever heard, and then that moment in the universe and being able to take the internal and the external and kind of connect and then create something new by synthesizing all that.
Yes, I love what you're saying. So I will kind of rephrase it in context of my understanding based on what I've learned through my qigong practice. So everything is energy, frequency, and vibration, and that's what Nikolai Tesla and Albert Einstein have said. So quantum physics, mechanics, we kind of take the woo out of it, right? For those people that
Mhm.
are like, "What are they talking about? This sounds too fluffy for me," right? Like, no, like hardcore scientists have stated this. Everything is energy, frequency, and vibration. The way I like to state it is that everything is information expressed as energy vibrating at various frequencies.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about playing music and you're channeling that flow, because if you're in this flow state, because of your passion, you're vibrating this high frequency that opens you up as a receiver of information. You're now a radio receiver
Hmm.
in a sense, and now you're receiving the information from the field, the energetic field that surrounds us and is within us, and you're bringing in that information, and you're in a flow state, so it's getting expressed. Your spirit is expressing this information that is coming through you because of this high vibrational state that you're in.
Yeah. And I believe this happens, if you're an actor and
Yes.
you're on stage doing like an off Broadway play and you're kind of riffing, or you're a poet
Yes.
and you're kind of doing, slam poetry, and you just open up yourself to like do that in the moment, just like the jazz fusion artist. And I believe that there's that ability to be in that flow state in the present moment and trust yourself to be that,
100%.
yeah, to be that creative channel. And there's a lot of people that really stop themselves because they stop and start. They won't go with the flow. They're trying to make it perfect
Yeah.
and not understanding that the little changes that are happening in that frequency, that like you're a receiver, and they
Yes.
don't they get scared of it. They don't
Yeah.
know what to do with it.
Yes, and this is great because what you're talking about, those blocks to that ultimate flow state where the magic happens, right? Because that's when the magic happens, right? When you're in that state and you're just jamming and you're creating something extraordinary, right? You've lived those moments. Well, you mentioned the lack of confidence. It's a block. Which element? That's the fourth element, right? In the generative cycle. That last element is faith. Faith, confidence leads to faith. Faith is that belief in yourself, and I also advocate a belief in a higher power. But faith, belief, and if say you're starting to get confidence, but now you have a lack of faith, well, that's that blocker, and you're not going to get to that ultimate flow state. So, as the 5 elements of entrepreneurship, if you don't generate through that generative cycle from passion to discipline to expertise to confidence to faith, you're not going to get into that flow state with your business. You need to generate that capacity and keep it in balance to achieve a flow state. It's the same thing. It's the same thing with like music, like you're talking about, various art forms, or like, whether it's poetry, painting, sports, they get in flow states. When I practice Chinese Kung Fu for the many years that I've practiced, you're right in the mix, and there's a spinning kick coming at your head, and you just kind of move, and it's like running right across your face, and you're like, woo, wow, that you're in the flow state.
You're learning how to take all those things you practice and put them into like the proper flow based on what the situation.
Yeah,
But
it's another form of creativity. Actually,
yeah,
I'm expressing my spirit through this movement of the body, and actually, the founder of the system I'm in, the primary system I'm in, he's really genius. Elder Harry Castell is his name. It's based out of New York City. He came up with what he calls, you'll like this, a methodology called SCRAW. And SCRAW is an acronym. It means spontaneous, creative, rhythmic adaptation method.
yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, I
Yeah,
can
right.
apply that to a lot of things.
You could, right? To jazz, especially, right? Because jazz
Yeah,
is spontaneous and it's
yeah,
creative and it has all kinds of rhythm to it. And you got to adapt as the chord progressions adapt. That wrong note comes in, but then it leads into something awesome because,
yeah,
you just
yeah. You just
change keys or whatever.
you change it, and it's like the mic. It's like we've got polyrhythms. You could change your rhythms. Like there's a lot of things
Yeah.
today where people get stuck in grooves. They get stuck in
Mm,
things that are predictable. They see an
yes.
algorithm and said, this algorithm gets 1 billion views, so this is the sequence of frequencies I should use and rhythms I should use because it's tried and true and it's getting all these hits. With not understanding like what Hendrix came up with, what he did, there was no previous example of that. When
Hmm.
Miles Davis did Bitches Brew, there's no previous example of what he was doing at that moment, or
Right.
Sun Ra. So the idea that you just have to replicate what already exists is very boring to me as a producer. When I see people that just want to
Yes.
clone and copy and cut and paste things that were already done. Not that music that doesn't have certain things. If you do blues, Delta Blues has a format,
Mhm.
but the way the Delta Blues artists approached it, each individual had their own style. So
Right.
even though it was the pentatonic scale, they're doing it in a different way. And so it's not
Yes.
exactly a carbon copy sample type of clone. But what AI would generate, it's actually very unique. And so this is where people don't trust like the happy accident or actually free flow recording and try to go into the grid and hit the notes so they're totally no microtonal errors, no
Mm.
rhythmic errors, everything's on the BPM. I'm like, why would they do that? That's boring. You
Right. Right.
know?
Yeah, that's another great example because it's how we evolve. Music, it's so dynamic, but business is dynamic, life is dynamic. It's ever evolving and changing. And when we're get stuck in a routine, a pattern, a rhythm, you need to change the song. That's the way I like to talk about. Change the song, break pattern. That's how you get to new heights. When you're stuck in a rut, right? You're
Yeah.
stuck in a looping pattern, and nothing's changing for you. You got to get out of that mindset. And the way you do that, you have to change the song. You need to break the pattern, start a new rhythm, establish a new rhythm. Everything that you talked about. There's just my book is using Chinese Kung Fu as an analogy for business, because I applied those principles. But just
Mhm.
like you're talking about music, since I'm a musician also, rusty, but I understand your language and where you're coming from. And you can take all very similar principles and apply it to business as well. Like we're really jamming on saying the same stuff, coming from
Yeah.
two different
Yeah.
angles, but it's the same stuff really at the end of the day.
Yeah. Because when we do like beta testing in our software design, and we
Mhm.
had an original use case, and then suddenly through our agile programming method, we're going and doing this like sequential iterations. And then suddenly something shows up that we didn't plan. And that is the happy accident, like the chord change or the note. And when you either say, well, I'm gonna hide it or not talk about it or embrace what you just discovered. What you just discovered is what you check it, it's like this is actually going to be more valuable than what we were doing. This
Mhm.
this this new thing that we stumbled on is actually a better idea than what the project plan said we should be doing. And the problem I have is when people don't look at that and say, well, it's not on the plan, so I'm not going to do
Mm.
it.
Yeah, yeah. I like to talk think in terms of frameworks, where a framework is a guiding force, but it's meant to flex, right? And that's where when you have these developments like you're talking about, well, the framework would allow for freedom. Yeah, there's structure, but there's flexibility to allow for those magic moments to occur. In my opinion, that's a great way to go. It's interesting because in my company, we we did a lot of work for some pretty big companies, and it was interesting. We followed a lot of waterfall process, because in the world of marketing, budget's finite,
Mhm.
time is
Yeah, yeah.
finite, and it's hard to work in an agile methodology when you have those constraints on you like that. When you're developing a product for, like, say, Apple or Microsoft's developing a product, they have more resources, right? And agile is incredible for developing the best product possible for the reasons that you stated. But over time, we ended up taking our waterfall process methodology that we defined ourselves, and then started getting more flexible with it. And it became
Mhm.
more of a framework. And then we had agile aspects in it. So it ended
Yeah,
up being like a
sometimes hybrid.
hybrid
Yeah,
model.
the
Yeah, a
hybrid.
hybrid.
Can I work in insurance is like one of my primary software designs. And a lot of it's waterfall, but they've
Mm,
embraced Scrum and agile opportunities for like the UIs. So it's like when we
yeah.
design the UIs, we'll go through user stories and use cases and try to fit in that structure. But when we're dealing with the COBOL code, we might still be doing COBOL. All of
Mm,
that is like waterfall.
okay.
But the
Interesting.
UIs and the APIs might be done with user stories or use
Okay.
cases in Agile. So it ends up being
Yeah.
like part of it is waterfall and part of it is Agile, and you kind of have to figure out what makes sense to do, use those methodologies.
Yeah, that's interesting. So it sounds like more of the experiential aspect is done with more agile, but then more of all the logic, the pure logic layer
Yeah,
is in the
stuff
waterfall
with
concept.
the actuaries and all the mathematical algorithms that figure
Yeah.
out cost of insurance or to figure out
Mm,
death tables to figure out all the formulas that we run to figure out like
right.
how to price a product and respond to a product, respond to medical information and social media information and rate underwriting, get very complicated algorithms that come from these
Oh
actuaries.
yeah.
They're all mathematicians, and that stuff ends up being documented like math papers.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Wow.
there's not a lot of room for putting that into a user story because it's like it's going pages and pages, and you need to know what each element is and define it, what the tolerances are. And so, yeah,
Mm,
there's certain things that you're kind of limited by what you're actually doing
right.
to
Right.
to use a waterfall. But then you still like if you have an opportunity, you say, "Oh, there's a better way to run this algorithm. There's a faster mathematical formula." We're not opposed to actually doing streamlining it. You figure it out.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, so it's just interesting how I find is like my art world and my science world kind of combined because I'm doing design, and design is in itself creative.
Yes.
So I
Yes.
like to try to bring the things I do with my music and to go back and forth. Where I kind of like music is very mathematical. Music is,
Hmm.
yeah, I can build frameworks. I can build a foundation.
Yes.
So like a project plan to a
Right.
song, to an album, to a movement, to a
Yes.
structure, and I can have a certain framework, but then I can have parts of it to have some dissonance or some
Right.
noise or something that's a little off key. Like I do a lot of stuff with oscillators. I use analog oscillators.
Hmm.
What I like about them is they're like living, breathing things because they're temperature dependent. So when I turn my Moog analog synthesizer on, how it acts when the second I turn it on, it sounds different 30 minutes later
Wow.
because the way the oscillator circuits are working, it's old 1970s, 60s technology, and it doesn't work like digital. It has variability. It almost has a personality, and
Wow.
it will not. It doesn't always sound in sync. And when you do the oscillators create these waveforms, they have some variability. Each machine is not even the same. Like off the
Wow.
production line, their tolerances for each Moog is like getting a different, like a 55 Gibson versus a 56. They sound different.
Wow.
They
Wow.
don't
That's
even,
cool.
yeah. So you can use that instead of trying to tame it. You can
Mm.
use the fact that it's a little different as an attribute as a good thing, not trying to
Right.
force it to be the same.
Right. Right. That's just a way to utilize it for an additional layer of creative expression.
If you think about like some corporations, they try to take people and force them into a box without accepting that maybe this person's point of view could be useful, but if you kind of bring it out of them to
Mm.
try to make them all like machines in those cubes, like, are you really getting the benefit of human capability by saying everybody's got to fit this bell curve? Rather
Right.
than
Right.
looking at the edges of the bell curve, you might find an Einstein or a Tesla.
Yeah.
If you're trying
Yeah.
to get them into the box, you ain't, Einstein probably wouldn't fit in the box. Well, he didn't fit in the
Right.
box. Tesla
Right.
didn't fit in the box either. It's like, but you're trying to put people in the box and then wonder, like, well, maybe you're not performing because you're putting people in the box.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course, like that round pagan, the saying, the round
Pagan square
peg into
hole.
a
Yeah.
square hole. Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, and when you're forcing things, and actually a principle of Taoism is to do not force, let things happen naturally. That was one of the early principles I learned when I started studying Chinese Kung Fu, and I was like, wow, the natural way is the best way. Wow, that's really cool. There's a saying that Lao Tzu said. I'm going to kind of paraphrase it here, but nature is not in a hurry, yet everything is accomplished.
Yeah. And
Right?
there's so much variation, there's all this mutation. Like,
Right.
nature mutates, you like look, like even in the current world with the COVID crisis, that COVID mutates. It
Hmm.
doesn't stay the same. You have to stay on
Yeah.
top of it. Nature doesn't stay in the same spot. It's always evolving. It's always changing. It's always trying to survive. But then
Always.
we try to spend time trying to say, well, we could create this pattern. This is the pattern.
Yeah.
Create this
Yeah.
12-step, 20-step. You need to be able to do something incrementally for the rest of your life. And it usually it's probably not going to just be a limited step, right? You're going to have to learn how things are going to change. That step may
Absolutely.
not apply for this moment. Can you be
Absolutely.
able to work on the fly and then not say, well, oh, it doesn't compute because I don't have the answer? Like, well, you've
Right.
got to evolve to the answer.
I mean, imagine trying to let's say we time traveled real quick, and um, we go back 30 years, and we're working a certain way, and the tools that we used and the method and our process of doing work that we would do now bring us into the present moment. The stuff that we did, would we be effective and efficient today using that style of work? No way, right?
Yeah.
We'd be dinosaurs. We wouldn't be able to work. We wouldn't be like, dude, why are you so slow? Your work sucks. Yeah, like all these things, right? And now here we are with the advent of AI becoming mainstream, and it's the same thing. You have people that are going to embrace AI to use it as a tool are probably going to replace the people that are pushing back against it. And I think when the creative publishing era, started in, I guess, late 80s or whenever. And you had the traditional ways of how people did typesetting and paste up and all that stuff. And then the computer came along, Apple's, and with
Adobe and all that.
yeah, all Adobe, and just think the same type of thing, where now these people, probably the old timers, are like, that technology, that's crap. That's not the way it's
Yeah,
done.
they want to do it manually. Like there's
Yeah.
a place for doing like manual work. And like I have digital synthesizers and I have analog synthesizers and I have so there's to me, some people would say, well, I can just use the digital and I don't need the analog. But the analog sounds different, right?
Hmm.
And so you can get the digital to type almost sound like the analog and it's more convenient, but there's something about the organic instrument, which is the
Yeah.
analog is more like. So it doesn't get totally replaced. And people always say, "Oh, I'm just going to totally replace." It's like I don't ever think it's totally going to replace.
Right.
And even AI lose. If I look at it like as a musician, I have some tools that I could go start playing a chord, and I could turn the AI computer capability on, and it will make a bass line to follow my chord. Now,
Mm.
that's not me going and say, do a prompt and go find a Coltrane song and copy that. I'm actually playing something unique and then letting AI kind of play with me because I don't have a bass player now with me
Hmm.
and I want to see what it will do.
That's
And
wild.
I might not like everything it did. So I might go in and edit some of what
Yeah.
it did and put the human elements like that. But I
Yes.
feel the human element's always still going to be there to
Yeah.
make a choice. And,
100%.
the people saying that it's just going to be 100% AI. I'm like, I
Mm.
don't know if I really want that. And I don't know if
Yeah.
people are actually going to dig that. I think they're still going to want somebody in there.
Yeah. 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 That's where I say it's people that embrace it and utilize it, but it's still people. It's just not purely machine. Yeah. Because otherwise, why are we here? Right? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Good.
Because if we get to the
Yeah.
point, it's like, well, if AI creates all the music, it's like, well, what's the point of that?
I know, right? And AI creates this and that and does everything. Oh, okay, then why are we even here? What's the point?
Yeah, if you
And
have it do
yeah.
like a task that, like, if you're a musician, right, and you've got your mixing board, and you could run it through many, many different types of processors to change the vocal, right? So if I have AI and say, give me 30-second little snips of what it sounds like with this compressor, that compressor, this compressor, so I can run through all those compressors and make a choice, right? That's kind of cool. That's a very cool use of a
Yeah.
tool where a
Yes.
recording engineer would have to go find that compressor, go hook it up. If you can go and give me what those sound like, then I can make choices. And I could actually say, well, the first 30 seconds I go through this one, then a minute, point 0.5, I go to another one. Then I start making changes, which is what people used to do on the boards and
Mm.
physically plug things in, unplug things. They would have people do that. But now you could have workflows where somebody didn't have all those things. And now the AI gives them access to capabilities they couldn't have afforded or they didn't
Yeah.
have the time. And so now they
Huh.
potentially can make something beyond what they could have normally done. That's how
Yeah.
I see AI opening up things, and it's the same thing. You could apply that to business and to manufacturing. You could have somebody that comes up with a design. If they use AI and they use some 3D print, 3D printing, they could do something that before needed like 50 people in a big facility. And
Hmm.
now a micro manufacturer, micro factory could be in your house, and you could come up with
Right.
something. It's like when I lived in Japan, there was a section of Akihabara, Electric Town, where you had these really micro, like engineering firms. It's like this very small place, and they make the best component. And it was this tiny little shop that was like the best of the best, and it's like very small like operation, but it was known that this is the best thing, and they're
Mhm.
very specialized. Now people can have that kind of capability.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah. Like what you're talking about is by leveraging these tools to take care of these manual processes that took a certain amount of time, you've now created space for evolved creativity, where now the human consciousness can now go into unexplored areas of creativity that there wasn't the time for it before. Now there is, based on the technology, and I think that's wonderful, and that's exactly why. we won't be replaced, and why there will be the need for the human connection and what humans will embrace. It won't all be AI, in my opinion. And there's another aspect of AI, yeah, right, artificial intelligence, and then you have human intelligence. Well, what AI cannot do, it all stays artificial, right? It's at their own layer. But with human intelligence, what do we have the ability to do? We have the ability to connect to divine intelligence.
Mm.
When we're talking
Yeah,
about that flow state,
yeah, machine
right?
does do that.
Machine doesn't do that. So how could the machine really replace us? Because yeah, we have the advantage of, yeah, human intelligence is able to connect to divine intelligence. We're talking about the flow state and bringing that, connecting to divine intelligence and all the information field, and everything comes in to us. We're just this an incredible machine of ourselves, and you can get into all kinds of different theories and so forth of our reality and what we are
Well,
and
the
what
idea
this
is like,
place is. But
can the AI algorithm kind of get into disharmony? Can it do
mm,
like dissonance? Can it think of, oh, silence? Put the silence here.
right,
Put this other, like you can find the patterns that are similar and say, well, these are all similar. Like, well, what if you want to mix world beat with fusion, with
right,
punk in the
yes,
same thing?
right.
It might not ever make the choice to do that unless it randomly does it, but it might not have the aesthetic to do
Yes.
it. And the
Right.
aesthetic is the missing piece to me. Unless it becomes sentient and it gets a personality and it starts to make choices and it actually, it's like data on next generation and it actually gets a character and it makes choices and it wants to kind of be in this mode where it will make like it becomes like its own person. But I don't see
Yeah.
it there. I don't see where that is. I don't think we're not there. And some people probably think, oh, that's where we are. It's like, no, I don't think so.
No. Yeah. No. No way. No way. As humans, our from a medical qigong perspective, there's three bodies. There's the physical body, the energy body, and then the spirit body. Right. So as humans, you can think of spirit as our thoughts and emotions. Right. All right. Say AI has thoughts, but where's the emotion? Right. And then
Yeah,
when
that's
you
the thing.
right, and you bring and music is all about emotion, right? Or
Yeah,
there's math underlying it, there's the logic and the math behind it, but there's emotion is what brings it to life. And you have two humans from two different cultures coming together to create, they're each playing their own cultural music, but now the fusion of that creates something new and beautiful. It's because of that human connection, the spirit that comes together, the thoughts and the emotions being expressed and creating something beautiful and new. And I think you're definitely right when it comes to AI trying to do that. How easily would it be able to create something with a high aesthetic? I have my doubts about that. Maybe
yeah.
it'd
I
be a
don't know if
random
it
accident, but
would become like an innovator like Hendrix, like decide that it could, create feedback and at a moment's notice make it sound like a bird and then make it sound
yeah,
like water and then do this kind of fusion of like blues, but then it's cosmic and then it's kind of punk and it's raucous and it's going all these different directions. And it was like even
yeah,
today, nobody kind of fits his paradigm. Even when you say, well, Stevie Ray Vaughan plays like Hendrix, no, he doesn't. He's a Texas blues guy that
yeah,
can channel voodoo child, but he never
mhm,
played like what's anything that's like on Electric Lady. He never played it like
yeah,
that.
right.
He can
Or
channel voodoo child, but he can't get that feel and hardly anybody can actually channel that feel because that was like uniquely him.
yes, absolutely. And I think another example is how could AI determine, oh, let me play this guitar like a piano, like Stanley Jordan did
Yeah,
with all the tapping, right? I mean, it was like he was playing piano on the
yeah,
fretboard,
yeah.
it was just wild.
Well,
Um,
yeah. What happens is sometimes you get like Coltrane and Hendrix. There's like a connection where Hendrix has some capabilities that come from horn or wind instruments that he actually channels some wind capability. He's actually like playing a sax on the guitar, and it's coming
yeah,
from a mindset where you get like a guy like Pete Townsend was a guitar player, and I'm a synthesizer guy, and I was very much enamored with the way Pete Townsend approached synthesizers as a guitar player. He approached like on Barbara O'Reilly and Won't Get Fooled Again, those 1970 songs. He approached it in a way that Rick Wakeman or you know, any of the other great keyboard players, Bernie Worrell, they don't play it that way. He
Yeah.
came up with this idea that a keyboard player wouldn't have approached it. He approached it as a guitar player. And
Yeah, I
so
can see that with that song. That's wild. Yeah,
yeah,
I can see what
he
you're
does
saying.
things with the synth that a keyboard player or somebody who's classically trained on a piano doesn't think that way. And that's
Right.
where you get the changes, where you get these advancements where somebody who is not comfortable with an instrument gets on the instrument and approaches it in a way that they wouldn't have been trained to do.
Right. Totally abstract thinking, bringing
Yeah.
in something new.
And that's the human element to approach it in that way, where it's like randomly, like you come in, it's like, why not? But
Yeah.
I don't have to do what Berkeley said. Like, Berkeley professors are constantly known for saying, "Yeah, we taught you the rules of theory, but now
Right.
break them," because that's what the innovators do is they break them, they break the rules.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. 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 I love it. I love it. Great examples.
Yeah, and I believe it's like there's a lot of energy in creativity, and people say,
Hmm.
"Well, how does music work with that?" Well, music is frequency. And
Yes.
we've been talking about like you could be a CEO and you're picking up on this frequency and you're attracting all these engineers, you're
Hmm.
attracting designers, you're attracting these people to get into your startup and they're all like feeling your vibe. Well, that's energy. That's the
Yes, it is.
same kind of energy my oscillator or my sax or my bass is giving it when I'm jamming with a group of people. It's the same kind of creative effort. In my
100%.
opinion, you know.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. When music's being played and expressed, I mean, there's the nature of the chords, say a major chord compared to a minor chord, the evoking certain emotions, joy, happiness, more sadness,
Melancholy,
right?
yeah,
Melancholy, right?
the
Yeah. So
energy
there's
of
aspect,
fierceness, yeah.
right. But then there's the actual human energy that gets behind it and amplifies that effect, that energetic effect of that music, that really makes people feel it. That's, when uh, music is so much emotion. When I played in some bands and I played live in front of people, that's when there was such an interchange of
Yeah,
energy between
yeah, you
the
feed off the
musician and the
crowd.
audience. Oh
Yeah, you
yeah, it
feed
was
and I think you feed off the when you're at work and you're with that group of people, like in a jazz session, you're feeding off that same kind of vibe. If you're in that
100%.
if you're in that jazz session, you're in that scrum session, you're in the boardroom and you're coming up with your plan, that's the same energy. It's the same
Yes,
thing. And when
yes,
people don't realize like the creative type of spark that sometimes like on that bell curve you don't understand, like sometimes having that creative in the room and they might not have the credential on the paper, but they might have the feel and know what to do. And so this is
100%.
where I think business sometimes doesn't actually have the right measurement for the talent they're looking for. And when
Yeah,
they get out there and they start making, taking risks with the talent pool and realizing that the more diverse or the more capable or in areas that you didn't think you needed, that you'll find you actually, have a lot better success.
yeah, 100%. Like, and when I was running my company, I always had the perspective that a great idea can come from anyone in the company at any time. And so we were highly collaborative and we had a multidisciplinary team that we would come together to in our process that we defined was be to innovate. And even someone that say is more in the logical mind, a software developer, programming logical minded, well, I think in my opinion programming can be very creative actually in the way you think about it and go about how to construct the application and all that. There's creativity in that actually. And when you get the designers, the various types of creatives with the programmers and then the business strategists, and they come together, a great idea could come from any one of those people at any time. And that just has to be the environment needs to foster that creativity and that positivity to have that magic happen.
Yeah, because I'm what they call business system analyst, and I don't have a comp sci degree. I came from a school, Bowdoin College. My majors were sociology and government legal studies.
Hmm.
But as a hobby, I like being kind of a hacker and building like video games on the side, hanging out with a bunch of nerds in my Alpha Delta Phi fraternity. And
Uh-huh.
so, and then programming my Moog synthesizers and my Rolands, and so, in my passion was like, I had it as a hobby, the kind of programming, but I didn't like the formal training because I was kind of out of the box. And then I
Mm,
found myself in the last 25 years being in software development companies and being successful as a business, analyst because I come up with the design, the
mm,
the use case, the BRD, and I
okay.
can come up with it, and it's not program specific. It's more like pseudo code. It's more like this is the
Hmm.
business case, and you
Hmm.
could use any technology to solve it. But I'm going to tell you what it could be and what the UI could be. And I, because I'm a creative person, I kind of imagine it. And the companies
Yeah.
they gave me the opportunity and to realize he didn't need to have the comp sci because he's got this kind of capability that came from a school like a Bowdoin. He's got this Socratic method, this
Yeah.
holistic mindset. He's willing to actually try to solve the business problem.
Right. Yeah, that's cool. I love that. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, just being able to, you have that ability to do creative abstract thinking to come up with a framework and a solution, like a solution architect.
Yeah,
Um,
and I think there are
yeah.
more people in the liberal arts that could actually be in design, but they get stopped because they think they have to have the comp sci. And that's
Mm,
why I think that a lot of companies have limitations where they don't understand. They could have brought in more people with my background, and and they tend to,
yeah.
when they put the job rec up, it doesn't say somebody like me. It
Mm,
doesn't actually. And I've had like conversations with people say like, you have me. I've been working like 20 years, but you still continue to look for this person.
mm,
My background
yeah.
doesn't match that person,
Yeah.
but you say you want, but you have me.
Right.
So the disconnect.
Yeah, interesting, interesting. Yeah, I think that maybe the safe thing is probably the safe thing to look for the basic requirements. It's a risk to kind of go outside that standard in a sense,
Mhm.
but yeah, like someone like yourself, you're a living example of what can happen and the value that can be created when you are fortunate enough to have someone on the team like that, like yourself.
Yeah, I just wish people would be more open. It's like what I've always kind of been a mantra about is expansiveness, and
Hmm.
people looking for people not in the box. People are more creatives, and I see more startups looking for creators. Looking for people maybe more art background, more willing to tinker, not exactly. They have to have that conversation with them. They see them in the room, they see them on the whiteboard, and say, "Oh, yeah, I can see this person could fit." But I just think that the world needs to be more open minded than narrow lane focused.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. The more open-minded you are, the more opportunities that you can create for yourself. Like another principle, more of a Buddhist principle, I believe, is when you're coming into an environment, right? That you come in with an empty cup, meaning that it's like a slate that you've wiped
Like a
clean,
blank
a
slate,
blank
like
sheet,
open.
blank slate, right? So that you
Yeah,
come in open to any and all possibilities, not coming in thinking that you know it all, thinking that this is the way, this is the only way. I know everything, that my
yeah,
way is the best way. No, no, come in with an empty cup, come in with a blank slate, so that you can be open minded to learn something new. Maybe learn a new approach, maybe a new methodology, a new idea, a concept to create something that's even better than if you were stuck in your paradigm.
yeah. I think that's the progress. To me, is like cross lane, cross genre, multidisciplinary, allowing artists to participate more. And
Hmm.
when you bring in people thinking that artists, they're like, oh, they're starving artists, they don't have talent. A lot of times that artistic, creative kind of passion is exactly what you need in that room, in that session to kind of drive what is possible. Because they're not
Yeah,
they're going to come out of left field like Pete Townsend and say, oh, I
yeah,
could use this oscillator in a way that nobody thought to use.
Right, right.
That's what you want.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. It's like a band. They all come in with their base, their skill set, but then they get together and they create something awesome. But like Pete Townsend, he came in with this idea, and then look what they created out of that. And the same thing with a company and a team. We really did do our best work when we followed our process, which our process framework was once we went through the discovery stage of figuring out, okay, what's the client's needs and their wants and their goals and objectives and all that background information and what their challenges were. Or here's the problem at hand. Okay, well, now it's time to innovate and take in a multidisciplinary team. So the account strategist, the project manager, the creative officer, chief creative officer, UX designer, the front end developer, the back end developer, all these people coming together with their perspectives, bringing something to the table to problem solve. And any one of them could come up with a creative idea on how to get around whatever that challenge or problem is, just like a band, comes and creates beautiful music together.
Yeah, it's just so interesting, how things can come about. And it's like if you change hats, like if you rotate and have people go through, it's like you should, be in this person's shoes for a time. Learn what it is to do this, what it is to do that. Then you get different perspectives. And sometimes today people want people who already just, oh, I just want them to have the skill. And they're not
Hmm.
willing to kind of rotate and learn new skills. They kind of pigeonhole somebody that, oh, all they're going to do for the next 20 years is this. I'm
Hmm.
like, is that really what you should be doing?
Yeah. Yeah. People get in a mode. They want to, one, it's safe. Two, it's fast. It's what they kind of, and there's a lot of pressures and demands for that. So you can kind of have an understanding as to why. But, like we talked about earlier in the conversation, breaking pattern, right? If you're not advancing and evolving and creating more efficiencies, creating more value, if you're just kind of stuck doing the same stuff, then eventually you're probably going to start to diminish as your competitors thrive and start
Yeah,
outpacing you, right?
yeah. Because I mean, if you just you don't push the envelope, to me, it's like you got to get to that kind of bleeding edge, and that's
Mhm.
uncomfortable. Like when
Yes.
change is uncomfortable. But to
Yes.
me, like you could get into a pattern, then start having diminishing returns because you're
Yes.
not innovating.
Yeah.
You're
That's
not
right.
on the top of your game. And I think that's where the balance it gets out of balance. Like you said, it's about balance. And we have to kind of finish with that kind of thought. But I think you get out of balance if you don't put yourself to a little bit of discomfort to try to get into something to learn. If you just say, "Well, I'm just
100%.
gonna rest on my laurels and stay at this," then you're gonna eventually start diminishing and become not as good at this, and then you're not gonna be happy and then you're gonna fall out.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Um, Another way to think about it in my 5 element model with the balance, one reason why someone may not want to experiment, changing all the stuff that we're talking about, is perhaps their confidence has gotten to such an excess condition that now they become arrogant. And in that, right? And that arrogance is like, oh, I'm so good, man. This is a breeze. I just keep doing the same thing. I don't need to learn anything new because my way is awesome. I'm the best. And yeah, like, my way is the way. And I just rock and I don't need to keep, working. So what's happening is having that it has a relationship to discipline. So now what happens is this arrogance insults discipline because
Mm,
now as the arrogance is kicked in, the discipline starts to fade. And then what
yeah,
does that do? All of a sudden that relationship to expertise, the expertise starts to diminish, especially when you have competitors out there that are innovating, experimenting and innovating, learning new ways to do things so that suddenly this imbalance puts you at a disadvantage in the marketplace.
Yeah, you're no longer the expert in your field. You're no longer the known brand. Like, oh yeah, this is like this brand has always been on top, and then some upstart comes and they have a different way of doing it, and now you're not the standard anymore.
Right, right. Yeah,
You know,
exactly. Then you're humbled, right?
it's like, oh, I used to be the standard, and
Yeah.
now I'm not.
Yeah, yeah, and that's another. There's a quote I have in my book that uh, how do I phrase it? It's about being humble, and if you're not humble, eventually you will get humbled,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah, there's always going to be some competitor. Like if you think about it, like somebody's been practicing in the martial arts. Eventually, they're gonna if they keep on revising their technique, and as you get older and they get more innovative, you get into a challenge. They're going to beat
Yeah,
you
yeah,
unless you
that's right.
find a way to be a step ahead. And being a step ahead is not probably going to be doing the same thing. He's like you're going to have to learn different aspects or different things that you're maybe not comfortable with. But
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's all about
discomfort,
getting out of your comfort zone. Yeah, that's
yeah,
how you evolve
discomfort
and
is
grow.
poor. I mean, it seems kind of like, oh, well, how could I be good if I'm not comfortable? But like the only way you
Yeah.
can progress is to challenge yourself.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, life's a trip. It's funny because the things that put us in discomfort, that can be painful, are the things normally, usually, that are best for us, like getting into a cold plunge. Ugh, so uncomfortable.
Yeah,
But wow, you sure feel great afterwards, and it's really good for you.
yeah.
Uh,
It's just an interesting place to be. But this is probably the last podcast I'm going to do before the holidays.
oh, cool.
And then we're going to be continuing on going into next year. But it is awesome to talk to you today, and want to remind people to check out C squared pro.io, and that will be fully clickable when we're published. Again, we're going to be on all the platforms that podcast can be watched or listened to. We've been on Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live, and later we'll be on Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio, many, many more. But thank you again for being a guest on the Family Electric podcast.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure being here, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to share my book and and all the wonderful
Business
things that
Kung
we
Fu.
talked
Yeah,
about.
check that out.
Yeah, yeah.
And Business Kung Fu is available like on like Amazon and on your website.
Yeah, Amazon. Now you can download the first chapter for free on my website on the URL that you have up there. You just fill out the quick form and you get the first chapter for
Mhm.
free. And if you like it, then you can purchase it on Amazon. And then please leave a review. Reviews really help on Amazon. So and I've been getting
Mhm.
great reviews, and so I really appreciate people that leave reviews. It's really helpful.
Well, that's always important. Thank you
Mhm.
again. Have a great holiday season, and thank you again for being a guest on the show.
Thank you, Phantom. Thank you so much.